Welcome to Podcast Marketing Secrets. I'm your host, Al Morenton. In this episode, I'm covering stage 3 of how to launch a successful video or audio podcast, which is the build out phase. The previous two phases, the foundation and the tech setup phases, they took care of most of the back end stuff, which is crucial to having a seamless experience and producing a beneficial and consistent result with your podcast episodes. Now, let's get into phase 3 and start building out your podcast. Phase 3, the podcast build-out phase, is where things start to get real. It starts to get fun. You're actually building out the podcast and getting it ready to launch out to the public. Okay, so the first thing that you want to make sure that you do with the build-out phase is develop your trailer. First thing you do is you outline it and then you write it up. There's a certain number of things like welcoming your listeners or viewers, introducing yourself, who you are, why your audience should listen to you. You describe who your podcast serves, your ideal audience, so people know that they're in the right place or not. You want to build a community that knows, like, and trust you, and then repel everybody else so you could just be able to have a beneficial result with your podcast. And then next up, you want to discuss the problems that you see in your industry or community, and things that hold people back, and then how your podcast is going to help solve this problem or the problems. Next up is what your audience can expect from your podcast moving forward. And then you want to go into your release schedule, which is very important, so they could know that you're reliable, they can depend on you. And that has to do like what day of the week you're going to do it. If it's a weekly podcast, what days of the month, if you're doing it like this a couple times a month. And again, it gets the people to know that you're reliable and that they can count on you, and they get to know, like, and trust you because of this. Next up is the tentative schedule for the first couple of episodes, or the first few episodes, what they're going to be about, basically. And then you encourage viewers or listeners to subscribe to the channel so they can keep updated, and they're alerted when podcasts do get dropped. Next up is where they can engage with you, like on YouTube or Apple, social media, etc. And then finally, you just develop the outro, something like, this is Al Morenton with Podcast Marketing Secrets. Thank you so much. See you on the next episode. So, something as simple as that. And after you develop that outline and you've written it up, then you just record it and edit it and get it ready to go. Okay. So next up, you start implementing your episode recording workflow. So you develop the episode recording workflow in the previous phase, the tech setup phase, and now here's where you're putting it to use. So a part of that was, a checklist that you developed, like with the preliminary topic research, identifying guests and securing guests. And then on the day of the podcast recording, you're making sure your environment is distraction free. Are you using Wi-Fi, or are you going to be hardwired into the internet, like through an Ethernet cable? You make sure that your hardware and software is set up properly. You tested it out, tested out the microphone and a number of other hardware and software items. And if you do have a guest, you make sure they're confirmed, that they have a link to StreamYard or a Squadcast or Riverside FM, wherever you're going to be recording the guest interview at. And you have like all of the notes and research ready to go, and any questions that you have for your guests if you are doing a guest interview. And then finally, with the episode recording workflow, then you make sure like you have reminders there, like press record, and you smile, all that kind of good stuff. You don't want to do an interview and forget to press record. So you make sure that you have, that written down somewhere to make sure that you press the record button so your podcast interview is successful. Okay. So after that, you actually want to record the first episode and then edit it and get it ready to be uploaded when the time comes. So after that, with the build out phase, you want to have the hosting site set up. Okay, so that could be Buzzsprout or Podbean or Captivate, which is what I use, or a number of other platforms. You just want to start getting that set up and ready to go. Okay, so that includes optimizing it with your logo, your show description, your tagline, your profile pic, bio, any social handles you have. And the hosting platform will generally ask you for a number of items, so you just want to make sure that you populate the hosting site with as much info as it asks for, so you could be as successful as you can with the podcast. Okay, so after that, after you set up the hosting site, then you want to upload the trailer and your first episode to the hosting platform. Okay, so you want to make sure that in each of them, and with the trailer and the first episode, that you have your intro, your outro, your show notes, any calls to action that you may have, any links that are pertinent to that episode. Have it broken down in the chapters, any guest info, like link to their website or landing page, social handles, etc. And then any other pertinent info that is specific to that episode. And one thing to take note of is that if you have a controversial podcast, then something like alternative health, or maybe cannabis or CBD, then I would just upload your podcast trailer and not the first episode. That you want to, if you do have a controversial podcast, then you just upload the trailer, so that when you do submit it, submit the RSS feed to the different platforms like Apple, then you just, they'll just see that, they'll approve your podcast, and then after that, you can start uploading the episodes. But if you have a general podcast, like mine, which is how to help people to, launch and manage their podcasts, then you would upload the trailer and your first episode. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense to you. If you have any questions about that, just reach out. Okay. So after that, you want to make sure that your website is set up and is fully integrated. So whether you're doing a dedicated site for your podcast or a separate section on your existing website, whether it's a subdomain or a blog or whatever, you just want to make sure that it's set up and optimized for your podcast episodes. So note that you don't share your trailer and first episode to your website yet. You just want to make sure that it's set up and optimized to readily accept those episodes. So when you do upload them during the launch phase, everything is ready to go, and you don't have any hiccups, with that. Okay. And then after that, the final thing with the podcast build-out phase is making sure that your social handles are set up to announce it and launch your podcast, and then market your podcast episodes moving forward. So if you have like successful social media accounts already, then you might want to integrate the podcast into them. If you don't, then you will want to create dedicated social accounts that are specific for your podcast. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be a mix of the two. Okay. So like with me, I did a mix of the two. So the general 4 platforms that you want to market your podcast with are Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So with me, I had Twitter accounts and Instagram accounts, but they were more health related. So I created new accounts for podcast marketing secrets. But for LinkedIn and Facebook, I had pages that were dedicated to digital marketing, and podcast marketing secrets sort of goes along with that, like a podcast goes along with that. And I had a pretty good community built out already. So I just integrated the podcast into those two platforms, into Facebook and LinkedIn. So it could, doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be a mix of the two. Okay. So that pretty much completes the podcast build out phase of how to launch a successful podcast. In conclusion, phase 3 of how to launch a successful podcast, the podcast build-out phase, is where the fun starts to happen. You create and edit your trailer and first episode, as well as optimize the podcast hosting platform, your website, and your social media accounts to get your podcast ready to be released to the world. Remember to subscribe to Podcast Marketing Secrets on YouTube, Apple, or your favorite podcast listening platform to stay updated with the latest insights and strategies. You can also find us on YouTube and IG at The Podcast Marketer. This is Al Morenton with Podcast Marketing Secrets and Video Podcast Pros signing off. See you on the next episode.